Greetings! I'm Elmore President and Founder of the Proud Black Buddhist World Association. We at the Proud Black Buddhist World Association are not only the Black Buddhist force in America, we are the Black Buddhist force in the world. And today we bring you another exciting Black Buddhist history lecture. Now, one of the things that we like to tell you, that if you want to reach your goals, then you must find some heroes. Again, if you want to reach your goals, you must find some heroes, and we at the Proud Black Buddhist World Association bring you a black superhero. Now, when you think of the Buddhist religion, we must understand that there was a white and Asian practice to extricate all Black Buddhist history, culture, and language from the Buddhist religion. Just this year, we Black people saw the movie Hidden Figures, and we had no idea that it was a black woman by the name of Katherine Johnson that did the mathematical trajectory that got us Americans not only in space, but thanks to Katherine Johnson, a black woman, we were able to get to the moon. Now, this brings us to our Black Buddhist Lecture today. Now, my Black Buddhist Lecture is called Thurgood Marshall, Black Bodhisattva, Black Buddhist Lecture. There are two things that do not go together. That is, Black people and Buddhism. However, there are two things that should go together, and that is Black people and Buddhism, because the original Buddhist and Buddha were Black people. See, we know this through archaeology, anthropology, literary science, genetic science, and linguistic science, that the people of Magadha came from the Harappan culture, which was all black. There were no white people. However, during the 2nd century A.D., a white Kushan king by the name of Kanishka, he conquered India during what is called the Shaka era. Shaka means foreigner in the white language of Sanskrit, and he conquered the people, and he separated Buddhism through race, culture, and language. He created a new Buddhism called Mahayana Buddhism, and this is the time when they separated Buddhism through language, culture, and the language they used to change and extricate black history was called Sanskrit. So, we come to our Black Buddhist Lecture. Now, in order to give you an understanding of Buddhism, or the Buddhist religion, you see, we at the Proud Black Buddhist World Association practice the Buddhist teachings as taught by the 13th century Black Japanese Buddhist sage by the name of Nichiren. Even in Japan, ladies and gentlemen, there is an effort to extricate not only Black Buddhist history, but the Japanese extricate Black history of Japan, because the original people of Japan were the Jomon people. Look up the word Jomon, and you will find that the original people of Japan was black people. In fact, that was our America's first archaeologist. His name was Dr. Francis Alexander Chamberlain. He writes that even the first shogun of Japan was black. The Japanese actually whitewashed Nichiren and make him white. They extricate all black history. So you need Black Buddhist teachers who will go and put black history into Buddhism. Now, one of the things that we want to do to give you an understanding of the Buddhist religion, you see, the Buddhist religion was taken over by Asians, meaning that during the Christian era, when King Kanishka started, that is the time when he extricated all black people out of Buddhism. However, before Buddhism ever made it to China or Japan, it was in Africa 1,000 years before it ever even made it to Japan. The Buddha was there 1,000 years after the Buddha's death. Now, one of the things that we want to do, and we want to delineate Buddhism by what you know as Asian culture. See, there's a difference. People see some Asian on a mountain meditating, and they call this Buddhism. Now, it is Nichiren Shonin that delineated the difference between Buddhism. See, we who are Nichiren Buddhists or proud Black Buddhists practice the teachings as taught by Nichiren Shonin. He had a writing. His writings are called the Gosho. The Gosho are letters that Nichiren wrote to his disciples to teach them Buddhism. Now, to delineate what we know as Buddhism, we got to understand that Buddhism is actually the science. The word Buddha means wisdom, and Buddhism is a science. Now, Nichiren Shonin has a Gosho. Now, this Gosho is called Entity of the Mystic Law. Now, in the Entity of the Mystic Law, Nichiren kind of explains Buddhism, not from the fact that some person sitting up there meditating, but Buddhism is understanding the universal laws that is in our universe. This is how Nichiren explains it. He says, quote, and this is the Gosho, is called the Entity of the Mystic Law. It says, quote, these two aspects, the deluded and the enlightened, are indeed two different phenomena, yet both are workings of one principle, that is, the essential nature of phenomena, or the true aspect of reality. It is like a piece of crystal. If the crystal is placed in the sun rays, it will attract them and produce fire. But if it is placed in the moon's rays, it will produce water. The crystal is a single entity, but the effects it produces differ according to the circumstances. Now, he goes on further. The mystic principle is the true aspect of reality. It's like this. The mystic principle of the true aspect of reality is one. But if it encounters evil influences, it will manifest delusion, while if it encounters good influences, it will manifest enlightenment. Enlightenment means enlightenment to the essential nature of phenomena, and delusion is the ignorance of it. Unquote. Now, you see, Thurgood Marshall, who was America's first Black Supreme Court Justice, expressed an enlightened understanding of the U.S. Constitution, and the result was the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This was some of the most important legislation in the history of America, and that this is the first time in America's history where they outlawed legal segregation. Now, our lecture again is Thurgood Marshall, Black Bodhisattva, Black Buddhist Lecture. Now, the way to get a 21st century understanding of the Buddhist religion is to take the Buddhist religion out of the traditional roles and understand it as we see Buddhism. See, Buddhism is not some Asian on a mountain. Buddhism is understanding the essential nature of the universe. That essential nature of the universe, the Buddha put it in the Lotus Sutra. He put it in the title of the Lotus Sutra. The title of the Lotus Sutra is called Myoho Renge Kyo, and this is actually the essence of the Buddhist teachings. Now, we call Thurgood Marshall a Black Bodhisattva. You see, if you want to achieve your goals, you must find some heroes. And we at the proud Black Buddhist World Association understand that Thurgood Marshall is a Black superhero. Now, we at the proud Black Buddhist World Association understand the meanings. If you want to go and learn Buddhism, the way to learn Buddhism is to follow the way of a Bodhisattva. See, a Bodhisattva does not have to be a Buddhist, but let's give you an explanation of what the Bodhisattva is, and you would see why Thurgood Marshall is a black Bodhisattva. See, a Bodhisattva is an ordinary person who takes up a course in his or her life that moves in the direction of Buddha. You and I are actually, or anyone who directs their attention, their life to the practice, to a way of life of a Buddha is a Bodhisattva. A Buddha is one who does the right thing. Now, in common sense terms, a Buddha is just a person who we call is Christ-like. Now, what I want you to understand, that this is nothing this is not something that comes from Anthony Elmore. You see, in the 19th century, there was a book put out in 1833 called The Aneclipses. In The Aneclipses, it was written by a British historian by the name of Sir Godfrey Higgins. In the book, The Aneclipses, Godfrey Higgins expressed what we tell you in Buddhism. You see, Godfrey Higgins wrote, he said, the time has now arrived when it becomes proper to enter upon examination of the doctrines of the celebrated Buddha of India, which were the foundations of all mysticism of Western nations. You see, all the religions that we have today came from the Buddhist religion. Now, there were 3 black men in America that had the greatest impact on black history. Now, most black people know Dr. Martin Luther King. Most know Malcolm X. But if you ask the average black person about Thurgood Marshall, their knowledge and background of him would be very limited. Many would tell you that he was the first black Supreme Court justice, but beyond that information, we really don't know very much about Thurgood Marshall, and certainly we didn't know that he was a black superhero. Now, there is a clear-cut reason why I, Anthony F. Elmore, bring Thurgood Marshall as a part of our teaching. See, we purposely bring this great black leader into the Buddhist lecture to establish a 21st century relationship and understanding of Buddhism. You see, it was the white people, King Kanishka, and Asians who extricated all black Buddhist history out of Buddhism. And we must find heroes. See, nowhere in the world there exists a viable Buddhist culture that teaches Buddhism inclusive of our black Buddhist history, culture, and language. Specifically in our Western culture, the Buddhist teachings in regards to black people runs counter to the teachings of the Buddha. Now, let me take you to some writings, and I want you to get your Gosho out, those of you who are Nichiren Buddhists, or you can look it up. Just go to the SGI Nichiren Writings website, and you will read it. Now, there is a Gosho called The Expedient Means and Lifespans Chapters. Now, what you will find is that the way Asians teach Buddhism is not the way that the Buddha Shakyamuni prescribed us to learn Buddhism. See, the Buddha Shakyamuni prescribed that the way to teach Buddhism is through the integration of our customs and the culture of a people. We're not supposed to be doing our prayers in the Shindoku or Japanese language like the SGI, Nichiren Shoshu, and Nichiren Shu, or these Nichiren Shu sects teach. We should teach, Buddhism should be taught inclusive of our culture. Now, this is what Nichiren writes in the Gosho. It's called The Expedient Means and the Lifespans Chapter. And it reads, quote, when we scrutinize the sutras and treatises with care, we find that there is a teaching about a precept known as following the customs of the region that corresponds to this. The meaning of this precept is that so long as no seriously offensive act is involved, then even if one were to depart some slight degree from the teaching of Buddhism, it would be better to avoid going against the manners and customs of the country. This is a precept expounded by the Buddha. It appears that some wise men who are unaware of this point express extreme views, saying such things as, because the gods are demon-like beings, they are unworthy of reverence, and that this has offended many lay supporters, unquote. You see, what the Buddha taught is that we must practice Buddhism according to our own culture. Now, myself being a proud black man in America, I find it insulting and offensive that Asians and whites have not only extricated all black history, culture, and language from the Buddhist teachings, these Buddhist teachers disregard and disrespect the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, and they go against the customs of black people. If you are black and you are practicing Buddhism, you should make this a part of your culture, your history. I cannot come somewhere and practice with some Asians. I'm not Asians. Buddhism or the Lotus Sutra teaches us that we must practice according to our own history and culture. Now, in regards to American history, the former Black Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall was the greatest constitutional scholar in American history. Thurgood Marshall, ladies and gentlemen, argued more cases in the Supreme Court than anyone in the history of America. He argued and won more cases. That is why, or one of the reasons why, he is a black Bodhisattva and a black hero. Now again, the precept the Buddha taught, so long as no seriously offensive act is involved, then if we were to depart in some degree from the teachings of Buddhism, it would be better to avoid against the customs and manners of the country. You see, Nichiren Shonin wrote this in a Go show. It's called Propagation of the Wise. He said, quote, "The correct teachings of the time can be propagated only by a person of wisdom. That is why Shakyamuni, after expounding all the sutras, entrusted Hinayana Sutras to Nanda and the Mahayana Sutras to Manjushra. Concerning the heart of the Lotus Sutra, however, the Buddha refused to transfer it to any of the voice hearers, such as Ananda, or Bodhisattva, such as Manjushra. The Buddha summoned Bodhisattva superior practice and entrusted it to him." You see, Bodhisattva superior practices, ladies and gentlemen, is Nichiren Shonin. See, he gave us a superior Buddhist practice, and that is chanting of Namu Myoho Renge Kyo to an object of worship. We have here the Gohanzan, and this is our superior Buddhist practice. Please understand that it was Mahayana Buddhism, the time in history, whereas not only was all black Buddhist history, culture, and language extricated from the Buddhist teachings, it was Nichiren Shonin who challenged the Buddhism of Japan and noted that only the true and correct teachings of Buddhism is the Lotus Sutra. See, Nichiren further explained that the essence of the Lotus Sutra was in the title, and the title of the Lotus Sutra, or chanting the title of the Lotus Sutra, was a direct path to enlightenment. Nichiren noted in the Go Show, it's called the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra, and he writes, quote, "It was only when he reached the age of 72 that he first began to intone Myoho Renge Kyo, the Daimoku of the Sutra. However, the people in faraway countries such as China and Japan were unable to hear it at that time. It was over 1,000 years before China heard so much as the name of the sutra, and another 350 or more years before it was heard in Japan." You see, ladies and gentlemen, Asians did not even get the Lotus Sutra until over 1,000 years after the death of the Buddha. Now, there's a Gosho. It's called the Gift of Rights. Now, Nichiren further writes, quote, when the great teacher Milo compared these passages from the one of the 6th volume of the Lotus Sutra that reads, quote, no worldly affairs of life or work are ever contrary to the true reality. He revealed their meanings and pointed out that although the first 2 sutras are profound, since their meanings is still shallow and fails to approach that of the Lotus Sutra, they relate to secular matters in terms of Buddhism, whereas the Lotus Sutra explains that in the end, secular matters are the entirety of Buddhism. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the story of Thurgood Marshall, it is a Buddhist story as taught by the Lotus Sutra. You see, let me explain how and why we connect Thurgood Marshall to the Buddhist teachings via the Gosho called the Gift of Rights. See, the Gift of Rights also reads, quote, the true head lies in affairs of this world. The Golden Light Sutra states, quote, to have a profound knowledge of this world is itself Buddhism. The Nirvana Sutra states, quote, all of the non-Buddhist scriptures and writings in society are themselves Buddhist teachings and not non-Buddhist teachings, unquote. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the story of Thurgood Marshall is Buddhist teachings. Buddhism is not some faraway place or some guy out there meditating. Buddhism equals your everyday life. Now, it is the Lotus Sutra that teaches us that the story of Thurgood Marshall is the entirety of Buddhism. The question becomes, how do we use the story of Thurgood Marshall to advance or understand what it means to have faith in Buddhism? See, it was the Buddha Shakyamuni who taught the precept of following the customs of a region. It was in 1929 that the father of black history, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, established a custom whereas black people should accept not only white history, but it was Dr. Carter G. Woodson who established what we have in America called Black History Month. Why do we have Black History Month? We have Black History Month because white people or white races wrote out all the black Buddhist history of black history away from black people. When I was coming up as a child, we had very few black heroes because that's the way white races wrote history. And the institutions that teach history extricate black history. That's why on the Mall of Washington, they just established last year the Museum of African American History because races do not include black history. Now, this is what Dr. Carter G. Woodson writes about a custom. And this is what he writes. Now listen, this is the father of black history. And he writes, quote, those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration which comes from the teachings of biography and history, unquote. You see, ladies and gentlemen, history has proven that the world's most successful black people are those who embrace their culture, history, and language. What I want you to do is this. Let me put it this way. I want you to listen to President Obama explain what it means to be black and why is it important that we embrace our culture, our history, and our language. See, it is no problem being black. You should be great and proud to be a proud black Buddhist. Let's listen to President Obama tell us what it means to be black, and we're going to come back and finish this lecture, Thurgood Marshall, a Black Bodhisattva, Black Buddhist Lecture. Let's listen to President Obama.
Race in America is in the eye of the beholder. We call Barack Obama our first African-American president because of the color of his skin. But in truth, he is of course biracial, born of an African father and a white mother from Kansas.
The first line of your biography will almost certainly be not something you did, but who you are, right. The first African-American president. And yet, you're half white. You were raised by 3 white people, your mother and your 2 grandparents.
Right. And an Indonesian you can throw in there.
And an Indonesian. Are you comfortable with this characterization of you?
I am, actually. And the concept of race in America is not just genetic. Otherwise, the one-drop rule wouldn't have made sense. It's cultural. It's this notion of a people who look different than the mainstream, suffering terrible oppression, but somehow being able to make out of that a music and a language and a faith and a patriotism.
Being black meant only the knowledge of your own powerlessness and your own defeat.
Barack Obama once felt quite differently about race.
And the final irony, should you refuse this defeat and lash out at your captors, they would have a name for that too. A name that could cage you just as good. Like paranoid, or militant, or violent, or nigger. The earth shook under my feet, ready to crack open at any moment. I stopped, trying to steady myself, and knew for the first time that I was utterly alone.
The poet William Wordsworth wrote, "The child is the father of the man." So how to reconcile this troubled boy with the man who grew up to be president?
You saw President Obama, who is black and proud. There's nothing wrong with being black and proud. We must understand that Asians and white people extricated all Black Buddhist history, culture, and language from the Buddhist teachings. Now, there is a specific reason why we at the Proud Black Buddhist World Association make Thurgood Marshall a black hero. See, we must put our history or make our history, culture, and language inclusive of the Buddhist teachings. Now, there's a word we talked about in my past lecture on LBJ that's called Sanskritization. See, Sanskritization is the extricating of all Black Buddhist history, culture, and language. Now, let me explain to you via Buddhist teachings why Thurgood Marshall is important. Now, there's a ghost show called The 3 Obstacles and the 4 Devils, and this is what the Black Buddhist sage Nichiren Shonin writes. He writes, quote, "Everyone, regardless of rank or status, considers it natural for children to obey their father, for subjects to be loyal to their sovereign, and for disciples to follow their teachers. Recently, however, it appears that the people of our day, drunk with the wine of greed, anger, and foolishness, make it a rule to betray their sovereign, despise their parents, and scoff their teachers. You should read again and again the previous letter, which I explained that one should of course obey one's teacher, sovereign parents, but should they commit wrong, admonishing them is in fact loyal to them." You see, what we must understand, that for example, I studied Buddhism from the Japanese SGI. In the SGI, or Nichiren Shoshu and Nichiren Shu, these Buddhist sects extricate all Black Buddhist history, language, and culture from Buddhism. In fact, I left the SGI Buddhist sect because it was SGI leader Daisaki Kato who wrote that the Buddha Shakyamuni came from an Indo-Aryan cultural spirit. This man teaches white Buddhism. these Japanese extricate all your Black Buddhist history, culture, and language. It is Nichiren that tells us that we should honor our parents, our teacher, and our sovereign. Now, it was Thurgood Marshall who acted as a parent, teacher, and sovereign, and that because of Thurgood Marshall winning the 1954 landmark case of Brown versus Board Education, making legal segregation of our school systems illegal. See, because of that landmark ruling, Dr. Martin Luther King and other blacks, and later on whites, practiced civil disobedience against the laws, against segregation, to where they had to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and it was Thurgood Marshall, ladies and gentlemen, that made it possible for us to do this. You see, in the case of Thurgood Marshall, in regards to Black people worldwide, he acted as our parent, teacher, and sovereign, and we Black people owe Thurgood Marshall not only our highest respect and honor, we hold Thurgood Marshall to be a Black Bodhisattva. See, the Lotus Sutra and the teachings of Nichiren opened the doors for this practice. Again, Nichiren writes, and propagation of the wise. The correct teachings of the time can be propagated only by a person of wisdom. In American history, America had its first Black president to be elected and served. Black people or African Americans have many firsts. We at the Proud Black Buddhist World Association are the first independent Black Buddhist sect in our modern world. We as Proud Black Buddhists clearly teach inclusion of our Black Buddhist history, or our Black history included in our Buddhist practice. You see, those who practice with the Asian teachers, they are not what you call Proud Black Buddhists because they practice Sanskritization or the extrication of their Black Buddhist history. See, our embrace of Thurgood Marshall is following the precepts of the Buddha Shakyamuni, who explains that Buddhism should be taught in relationship to the customs of a people. We chant Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Now the word Namu means to awaken or to give reverence. Now, we awaken to the fact that Thurgood Marshall, in order to bring justice, fairness to not only Black people, but to all citizens of America, Thurgood Marshall mastered his knowledge of the Constitution. Now, we call this Myo. See, the word Myo means correct. It also means to open. So, Thurgood Marshall opened his mind to the correct teachings of the Constitution. That's Myo. And the correct teaching of the Constitution is the law. Law means whole. Now, Thurgood Marshall did what we call Renge. Renge is the symbol for lotus, and the symbol for lotus means the law of cause and effect. So Thurgood Marshall used the law of cause and effect, and he practiced what is called Kyo. Now, let us understand, to give you a clearer understanding why we follow Thurgood Marshall, or again what I say, in order to attain your goals, you must find heroes. Now, in the Go Show, the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra, it reads, quote, and he talks about the word Kyo. Nichiren writes, within the single character of Kyo are contained all the sutras in the worlds throughout the 10 directions. It is like a wish-granting jewel that contains within it all manners of treasures of the vastness of space that encompasses all phenomena. And because this single character Kyo of Myoho Renge Kyo is the supreme achievement of the Buddha's lifetime of teachings, The other four characters, Myoho Renge Kyo, likewise surpass all other 80,000 doctrines that the Buddha taught. In plain and simple terms, we use Kyo. This is also the teachings of the story of Thurgood Marshall. So we chant Nam Mu Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo includes the history of Thurgood Marshall. See, let's give you a little history. See, Thurgood Marshall was born in Maryland in 1908. Now, you got to realize now in 1930, he applied to the University of Maryland Law School, but he was denied admission, not because he was a good student, but he was denied admission because he was black. Black people suffered some of the worst inhumanity against humanity in America. These laws, Plessy versus Ferguson, where white people had separate but equal. It was in the mind of Thurgood Marshall to one day attack this injustice, not only against black people, but it's an injustice against Americans, and it's an injustice against humanity, these Jim Crow laws. Now, let me explain what is important. You see, Thurgood Marshall had the fortune. See, in Buddhism or in the Lotus Sutra, it reads, the Lotus Sutra is like a great physician that is able to change poison into medicine. Now, how did Thurgood Marshall change poison into medicine? Even though he did not go to the University of Maryland, but he went to Howard University in Washington, D.C., and he had the fortune to meet the new dean of the law school. Now, this dean was named Charles Hamilton Houston. Now, Dr. Charles Hamilton Houston instilled in all of his students the desire to apply the tenets of the Constitution to all Americans. Paramount in Houston's outlook was the need to overturn the 1898 Supreme Court ruling, Plessy versus Ferguson, which established the legal doctrine, separate but equal. Marshall's first major court case was in 1933 when he successfully sued the University of Maryland to admit a young African American, even though he couldn't go to the University of Maryland, but he sued that university and opened the door so other blacks could go. Thurgood Marshall called at Howard University was not just to be an attorney. What they taught the black people at Howard University, that you must use the Constitution. You must be a training ground to change not only America, but to change the world. And the people who went to the law school at Howard University, they became people who fought for freedom, justice, and equality for all people. This is why Thurgood Marshall is a great black Bodhisattva. He is a hero. You see, Thurgood Marshall worked for the NAACP. See, Thurgood Marshall, we have black people have an excellent model of black people to look at. Just as Thurgood Marshall became the most noted constitutional scholar in American history, we at the proud Black Buddhist World Association are like the Dr. Charles Hamilton Houstons, who motivated Thurgood Marshall and the law students at Howard University to master the Constitution. While Thurgood Marshall mastered the Constitution, we teach black people to learn your history or to learn archaeology, anthropology, literary science, genetic science, to challenge the racism in Buddhism, what is going to happen is that we are going to change people. We're going to lift the spirits of black people up. And they are going to challenge the racism. Are they going to take on the Daisaki Keita of the SGI who wrote that the Buddha comes from the Indo-Aryan culture spirit? We're going to challenge the racists who teach secularization, who teach the Aryan invasion theory, and that the Buddha was a Hindu. We are going to challenge all of this because we teach Black Buddhist history. It is the proud Black Buddhists that stand up and challenge the racism. And it may not be Anthony Elmore, but it's going to be young people who come after me who's going to challenge the racism in Buddhism, ladies and gentlemen. Now, at the time of this lecture, right now, even today, November the 13th, there is a movie showing about Thurgood Marshall. It's called Marshall. Now, in the movie Marshall, what you have a gentleman by the name of Reginald Hudgens. Now, Reginald Hudgens and his brother Warrington Hudgens, they did the 1985 movie called House Party. These young black people, they're not young anymore, but Reginald Hudgens did the Eddie Murphy movie Boomerang. He understands the importance of the production of the movie Marshall. Now, what he did was, he gives us an insight into Marshall before he became a Supreme Court justice. What he shows in the movie is a proud black man who was tall and handsome and intelligent, who knew the Constitution. This dude was like a wild, wild west gunslinger. He would get on a train and risk his life and go from town to town to town, and he would rescue black people who was treated unjustly. Not because they did a crime, but they were treated unjustly because they were black people. And it was Thurgood Marshall who fought, who challenged, who risked his life to help to bring justice, equality, and freedom. Now, what I want you to do, those of you who hadn't saw the movie Marshall, you should go see it. But if you didn't see the movie Marshall, let's listen to Reggie Hudgens talk about the movie and why he did it. He was the director and producer of the movie Marshall. Let's listen to Reginald Hudgens, and we're going to come back and finish this lecture. Thurgood Marshall, a Black Bodhisattva, Black Buddhist Lecture. Let's listen to Reginald Hudgens.
How'd this come about? Why'd you want to do the story?
For me, Thurgood Marshall is one of the most underrated heroes in American history. You've got the people who created the Constitution, founded America. But that fundamental core idea, all men are created equal, never truly fulfilled until Thurgood Marshall made it happen.
Why'd you decide to tell the story the way you did? Because it's not a typical from the, cradle to the grave biopic. You chose to focus on a specific case in this man's career.
I gotta be honest. I get a little nervous about biopics because they can fall into the category that I call the medicine movie. Oh, you need to see this. It's good for you. I know it doesn't taste great, but swallow it down. You must go see it. That's not how I want to sell a movie. I feel like people work all week. They want to have a good time. They want to see something with that suspense, that, you get scared. You might get a little choked up. At the end, you laugh a lot more than you think you're going to do. Then at the end of it, you go, that was good. That's what I was striving for with Marshall.
Now, you chose Chadwick Boseman in the lead. He's literally like a walking Black History Month calendar. Was there any apprehension about casting him? Because he's played a couple of iconic figures already in his career.
When Chad and I sat down to talk about doing this movie, he was very honest. He said, look, man, I don't want to do another historical character. I said, I know. I knew you might say that. Why don't you just read the script? So he read the script. He goes, man, now I kind of almost have to do it. Okay, but wait a minute. What about what I look like? I don't look like Thurgood Marshall. I go, you're right. you have a different skin tone than Thurgood Marshall. And you know who else had a different skin tone than the person they played? Denzel Washington and Malcolm X. And I don't remember anybody complaining about Denzel in that role. And I can tell you, I've shown this movie in front of a lot of audiences already. And no one, and I mean no one, complains about Chadwick Boseman in this role.
You saw Reginald Hudging. Now, if you want to learn Buddhism, we need Black Buddhist teachers. We need Black Buddhist directors and Black writers. Because historically and institutionally, white people and Asians are not going to tell your story correctly. They do not make Black Buddhist history inclusive. Now, it was Reginald Hudging who asked actor Chadwick Boseman to play the role of Thurgood Marshall. Now, many of you might have saw the movie Jackie Robinson. You might have saw the movie, the James Brown movie. It was Chadwick Boseman, who was a graduate of Howard University, where Thurgood Marshall attended school. The black school, Howard University, should inspire us because we got so much history. There's a sister who was an SG, I remember, who went to film school, and I told his sister, I said, why don't you follow the tradition of what you learned at Howard University? I got a friend, Alan Billups, who's a Buddhist scholar, but this brother follows Sanskritization. He doesn't follow the black history, even though the brother is wise, even though he went to Howard University. These black people, they get in these Japanese organizations and they lose their black history. They lose their culture. They lose their language. They stop being black because they're following these Asian teachers. What I want you to do next is that I want you to listen to actor Chadwick Boseman tell about the movie Marshall and why he did this movie, and we're going to come back and we're going to put a period on this Black Buddhist lecture. Let's listen to Chadwick Boseman.
Baby, you go into these towns who've never seen a Negro lawyer.
Hey, boy!
You need to be careful.
NAACP.
Thurgood, you're going to Connecticut.
Joseph Spell, Negro servant, attacked socialite in our own bedroom.
This case will show the world if a colored man can get a fair trial in the United States.
There's only 13 million Negroes depending on you.
Don't any of you have any confidence in me?
I'd say you have enough confidence for us all.
It's Thurgood Marshall like you've never seen him before. The new movie Marshall chronicles a pivotal case in his career before he won the landmark Supreme Court case ending segregation, and long before he came the High Court's first African-American justice 50 years ago. Recently, I had a chance to talk to the actor portraying Marshall, the multi-talented Chadwick Boseman. What's interesting about Marshall, as opposed to some of the other work that you've done and some of the other biopics that we've all seen, is that it's not the story that people expect. You know, people would expect it to be, here's the entirety of his life, here's Brown versus Board. This is actually a courtroom drama. Mm-hmm. Did that intrigue you about the film?
Well, when I read the script, but the main thing about it was that I knew that you didn't have to know who Thurgood Marshall was in order to watch this movie.
Right.
And I think that's a great thing for an audience member to know that, like, I could come into this without any prior idea of who this man is and enjoy the movie, and later on have a greater appreciation for him, you know, knowing all of the stuff that he did. But you know, it's a Western. He's not just Thurgood Marshall. He is the Marshal coming into town to implement justice.
Yeah.
It's a who done it. You know, it's a buddy cop movie in a way.
Yeah.
Even though they're not cops, but
yeah.
it has the feeling of, you know, the guy who only works alone, because Thurgood Marshall was
At this particular time in the NAACP, he was the only attorney going around dealing with all of these cases because that's what the budget allowed the NAACP to do.
Yeah.
So he only worked alone, and you're seeing the beginnings of him bringing other attorneys in to work on these cases with him in various places throughout the country. So Sam Friedman represents that. So, but it was all these various different types of movies.
Yeah.
It wasn't written like a biopic.
Yeah.
That made me want to do it.
And the other thing that's intriguing to me is I always am struck as somebody who's a kind of a nerd and a history buff is when people find stories that I didn't know and that we don't learn about in our history classes. And this is obviously young Thurgood Marshall. It's not Supreme Court Thurgood Marshall. And the case isn't in the South. So you're talking about them going to Connecticut. It's a familiar narrative, a black man accused of rape, you know, facing all that meant in that period. We're talking about the 1940s. But it's in the North. How does that change the storytelling when you're talking about a narrative that is going to make people uncomfortable because it's not about the typical Southerners versus African Americans?
Yeah, well, you can't hide from it in the same way. You know, if it was the tobacco chewing sheriff and, you know, the fat judge with the dog and all of that stuff, you would know exactly what that is, and you'd be like, I can separate myself from that, or that was a different time period. But because it's the North, it is very similar to the racism that we experience today, because it is hidden, it is masked by housing and masked by, you know, in this case, it's not just white-black racism. You know, Sam Friedman is experiencing the fact that he is not a part of the club as a Jewish American, and he's comfortable with that until he meets Thurgood Marshall. So you see how the North sort of hid its racism, and that's similar to what we experience today. It's different words. We live in a race-free society. Like we think just because we had a black president that all that's done now. People look at the advancements that African Americans have made, and they think all of that is in the past, and they're just witnessing, you know, some cream that came to the top, not you know, the countless neighborhoods that have basically desert food situations and schools that are still not up to par. And so all of that is, you know, why this movie rings true right now.
Yeah, and you've been very vocal, even in talking about the current president that we have, Donald Trump, and saying, listen, you know, this is part of the gig. Either take the criticism or don't be president. Do you feel that artists such as yourself are put in a position where, you know, people who like Donald Trump also like your movies? And do you find yourself in that sort of Michael Jordan position where you're saying, well, I don't necessarily want to offend that part of my audience? Or do you feel that it's your responsibility as an artist to communicate to that audience too?
Well, if you're offended, you're guilty. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't feel like I've said anything that will make an audience member be like, I'm not going to his movies. You know, I have a right to criticize the president. You know, like I'll criticize him right now. Like, in fact, you know, to say we would defend ourselves against North Korea, I understand that. I don't understand saying I will totally destroy this country. That's where you're it's not presidential.
I'd have to do one more little political question. You are an alumnus of Howard University. There was a protest against Jim Comey when he went down. You know, one might argue that, you know, Comey is trying to be a positive voice when it comes to things like race and policing. How hard is it for us, do you think, you know, as a young black man yourself, to have these conversations around race? Is it depressing to you that we still can't seem to have them in a comfortable way?
I don't even think about it that way. It's just it's if I think about how, you know, much time has passed and things haven't changed, I can think of it in that perspective. But it's also a very young nation. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, as much as people are like, make America great again, you can always do better. I can always be a better actor. I can always be a better person. So America has never been as great as it should be. And so, you know, I don't feel like I'm tired of talking about it. If it's not done, it has to be done. It has to be fixed.
Lastly, to come back to Marshall, is there anything that doing this film taught you?
Well, every character I've ever played teaches me something. You know, I would say for me, the greatest thing that I look at when I look at Thurgood Marshall is the comfortability of the comfortability that he had. You know, he was in Harlem. He was amongst some of the greatest artists of that time during a Renaissance, and he chose to leave that comfortability and go around the nation and fight injustice. And that is, it's not just an admirable thing. It's like you look at who that person is and you say, well, where does that selflessness come from? And it's just an incredible thing. So it just puts a fire under you to make sure that, you know, that you do certain things a certain way and that things have meaning. Like, I don't want to just be doing films that don't have meaning or that push the envelope forward. You know, it's my desire to always be working on something that means something.
Yeah, well, Chadwick Boseman, thank you for being one of the great young actors of your generation.
Thank you.
And I'm glad that you took the time to do a film like this before Black Panther breaks the entire universe. Continue on, because that's going to be off the chain. I had to add that in, but thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You heard Chadwick Boseman talk about Thurgood Marshall and how he was like a gunslinger in the Wild Wild West who traveled across the country to save black people. Now, what I want you to know about Thurgood Marshall. Thurgood Marshall again has won more Supreme Court cases than anyone in the history of America. And it was the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, that in 1959, the country of Ghana gained its independence. And who did the United Nations go to? They called upon Thurgood Marshall to write the Constitution for Ghana and Tanzania. Now, I want you to take a look at a picture at my house. There's a picture at my house that I took last year. You see me with Congressman Memphis, United States Congressman Steve Cohen, and you see me with our Tennessee State Senator Reginald Tate. And behind the picture, you see John F. Kennedy with the black man by the name of Tom M. Boyer. Tom M. Boyer was a black man who came to America in 1956. And he started a program called I Lift America, where he got scholarships for African students. It was in 1959, a young man came to America. His name was Barack Obama Sr. He was a part of I Lift America, and it was because of Tom M. Boyer. Now, Tom M. Boyer met Thurgood Marshall in 1959. He was so impressed with Thurgood Marshall that he asked Thurgood Marshall to write the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya in 1963. See, they were British protectorate, but Kenya became a country in 1963. And it was Thurgood Marshall who not only won more cases than anyone in the history of America, who won more Supreme Court cases, but Thurgood Marshall wrote constitutions to help set up countries. And I want you to look a picture of Thurgood Marshall with Tom and Boyer. He's in London with Tom and Boyer. And I think that's Rana Nagala, who he's on the picture with. You see the picture of Thurgood Marshall in Kenya with Jomo Kenyatta, one of the most prized possessions of Thurgood Marshall that he had in his office. He had a monkey cloak, a monkey skin cloak that Jomo Kenyatta gave to him, that you give to kings. And Thurgood Marshall was up on his African heritage, and that's one of his most prized possessions as a Supreme Court justice. One of the things, and we're going to bring this thing to a conclusion, one of the things that I did, the week that the movie Marshall came out, you see me in a picture with Dr. Rajiv Kumar of India, where I told Dr. Kumar that he should go and see the movie Marshall to get an understanding of black history. Not only did I take him to the movies to see the movie Marshall, we took Dr. Kumar to our local NAACP headquarters to learn about the NAACP because, see, Thurgood Marshall used his name to establish the NAACP Defense Fund that even today, in 2017, the NAACP is still winning cases for freedom, justice, and equality for all Americans. Anyway, it's time that we bring this lecture to a conclusion. It was black people and civil disobedience and protests that helped us get legal segregation done away with in America. Many of you saw Thurgood Marshall and what he's done and what he understands. To this very day, the NAACP is doing the work. Now, when you see the proud Black Buddhist World Association, we see what you see and tell the story that these black people have black heroes. On our prayer book, you will see Martin Luther King, you will see Malcolm X, you would see Malcolm X, you would see Nelson Mandela, and you would see Behemro and Becker, the man who taught Buddhism, who reestablished Buddhism in India. Anyway, I think we said enough. We're going to conclude this lecture with our song. Now, which I say, we are the most suited, we are the proud Black Buddhists, and we're going to take you out. Again, our lecture was Thurgood Marshall, a Black Bodhisattva, Black Buddhist History Lecture. Thank you very much. Fighting in the world for freedom, justice, and equality, we're the best suited. We are called the Proud Black Buddhists. We're going to put you guys on alert in the 15th chapter of the Sutra where the Bodhisattvas are the earth. Them giant suckers who trying to knock us. We are the Black Bodhisattvas. Dr. King, Malcolm X, and Nelson Mandela were Black Bodhisattvas. The one Bodhisattva that come from India. His name was Nichiren Shonin in Mecca. The old name for India is Eastern Ethiopia. From the land of India called Eastern Ethiopia, a great man called Shakyamuni Buddha. His great teacher was the long-term sutra. The little sutra teaches justice, freedom, and equality. We teach the people how to be free. The teacher of the sutra, we're the best suited. We call ourselves the Proud Black Buddhists. Them giant suckers, they're trying to knock us. We are the Black Bodhisattvas. Them people in India treated worship like slaves. The people are called Dalits, or called untouchable or $10. It's the place where the world's racist culture, where black is at the bottom and they slave their brothers. We are black and proud, refuse to be at the bottom. We fight for justice, we the Black Buddhist Lecture. On the sutra, we the best suited. We call ourselves the Proud Black Buddhists. The SGI, Nichiren Shonin, and Nichiren Shonin. All the Japanese sects support the Brahmins. They do not believe in equality among us. We blacks in America must know where we at. We was joined with our brothers in India called the Dalai. The teacher of the sutra, we're the best suited. We call ourselves the Proud Black Buddhists. Them giant suckers who trying to knock us. We are the Black Bodhisattvas. Fighting for peace, justice, and equality. We cannot go too far. It's time to go to India to join the movement led by the Dalai America. We're the Proud Black Buddhists. We know who we at. We're going to help our brothers called the Dalai. The people in India call them untouchable. You're friendly to us, and you're most lovable. All them giant suckers who try to knock us, let them know that we're the Black Bodhisattvas. The teacher of the sutra, we're the best suited. We call ourselves the Proud Black Buddhists. Them giant suckers who trying to knock us. We are the Black Buddhist Lecture. equality. The Buddha fought for justice. We must become just people. We must become evolved human beings. We must join together for equality.